Good evening and welcome to the State of the Nation on AsphericTV. I am Ayolua Joshua. The State of the Nation is a program created by the AsphericTV to enable individuals, international organizations, agencies, government parastatals, and private sectors to highlight their achievements and plans in their various industries and to discuss how their plans affect Nigeria. Our viewers can interact with us on Facebook at Official Aspheric News, on Twitter at Aspheric News, on Instagram at Aspheric.news, and on YouTube Aspheric TV. And please do subscribe to our YouTube channel for more programs. Also, our viewers can send us SMS to ask questions, giving their own opinions and ideas concerning what we are discussing on 08099990549. Our guest today is Brian Shanley, and he is the head of the International Department of the Institute of Education, Dublin. The Institute of Education is Ireland's leading tutorial college. For over 30 years, Nigerians have studied here and gone on to enter top Irish and UK universities for medicine, law, and engineering. Brian has 7 years experience working with Nigeria in international education. And he will be discussing with us how to overcome the impact of COVID-19 on international education. Brian, you are welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much for having me.
And we believe you are doing very fine today.
I am. I'm excellent. I'm quarantining like most of the world. Ireland is actually exiting lockdown, which is fantastic. But I was in Germany last week. I didn't break the rules. It was just about within the rules. I had to go to Germany to visit a family member. But because I've come back from Germany to Dublin, flying obviously, I have to quarantine for another 2 weeks. So I've got a taste of what it's going to be like for international students when they arrive in Ireland in August and September. They're going to have to stay indoors for 2 weeks.
Okay. And we believe your family are doing very fine as well.
They're good. They're fantastic. It was there was the birth of a baby, a new niece. She was born in the middle of the pandemic. So I don't know if that's good luck or bad luck for the future. It was certainly interesting. But luckily Germany is a fantastic country with a great healthcare system. It was very different here. I have lots of friends and family who are either having a baby or just had a baby, and the Irish healthcare system really struggled the last few weeks. We went, as I said, we went into lockdown very quickly, a lot faster than our neighbours in the UK, but we still have a lot of restrictions. So if you're having a baby in Dublin, the father is not allowed to go in and visit the mother and his new baby, which is pretty tough on new families. But that's how seriously Ireland and the Irish government is taking it. But all of these restrictions have really paid off. You know, whether it's the quarantining or not allowing people into state services or moving all the state services online. Our COVID-19 numbers have gone way down. Our deaths have gone down. Last week we had 2 or 3 days where we had no new cases, which was phenomenal. And again, we don't have any. There's no real data yet about whether this is causation or correlation, but we did go into lockdown very quickly, and it seems to have helped. Whereas in the UK, which we share a land border with Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK, and we're very, very close to the UK in terms of trade and travel and history, just like Nigeria. Their numbers are just skyrocketing. which is very scary. Obviously, it's a bigger country, but even relatively speaking, their numbers and their deaths are way higher than Ireland's. So I think the lockdown works, and it was great to see Nigeria going into lockdown again so quickly. President Buhari didn't make it political. You know, he just made a decision. He locked down in Abuja and Lagos and the federal territories, and then obviously all the governors rode in behind him, which was great. And I don't know, I'm not there on the ground in Nigeria, but I was in Nigeria during the Ebola crisis, and I remember, I think it was in the New York Times, I was reading an article online, and it was predicting how Nigeria was just finished. You know, Ebola was going to wipe out the north, and then it was going to move through the south, and there'd be, 500,000 cases and 80,000 people dead, and the economy would go, but the Nigerian government really dealt with the situation. And I think it's because your society and your government is really used to crisis, and it sounds a bit crazy to say, but because you're used to crisis, you're used to responding to them. You're used to mobilizing. You're used to things not going to plan. So I think that all goes in your favor. And I'm not a doctor, but I'm very optimistic that Nigeria is going to pull out of this, and hopefully the economy will bounce back soon as well.
Yeah. And we really commend the Nigerian government for taking the best course of action to prevent the COVID-19 from spreading far beyond the way it spreads now. Tell us a little about yourself and the job you do in international education.
So, as you said earlier, I'm the head of the International Department of the Institute of Education. The Institute of Education, the best way to describe it for your audience, we're like a tutorial college. So, if you've heard of Bridge House in Ikoyi, or even maybe Olashore International in Ulsan State, it's like a finishing school. So we would do the last 3 years of the Irish secondary school system, and then we would prepare students for what we call the ILC, the Irish Leaving Certificate. It's like the British A-levels, or it's like the WIAC, but just it's a year 12 program, so it's slightly further on. So we would prepare students for that. Our Nigerians would normally come to us for 1 year. They'd normally finish their WIAC when they're 15, 16, and then they'd come to us for 1 year. And it's really for medicine. We obviously send students all over the world for everything, for law and engineering and everything else. But these days, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, these days there's so many foundations for business and engineering, but there's still not many ways to get into medicine for a Nigerian student. So we offer a pathway for that. So we're really strong with all of the 6 medical schools in Ireland. And we've been sending Nigerians to medical school since I think the early 1990s. And even Ireland's relationship with Nigeria is a long one. Maybe I don't know if this is boring you or your listeners with history, but we were one of the first countries on earth to recognize the new republic, and our prime minister actually flew to Nigeria in the 1960s. I think he was one of the only prime ministers to attend that first ceremony. And then the relationship with Trinity College as well, it's the oldest university in Ireland, one of the oldest in the world. They have a really long, proud history of taking Nigerians way back since the 1930s and 1940s. Really famous Nigerians like Jaja Wachukwu, the first minister for justice, Kayode Eso, and another Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, I believe, only died a few years ago. And then lots and lots of doctors. The first Minister for Health in Nigeria studied medicine in Ireland in Trinity College, and did his postgrad in the Royal College of Surgeons. So there's this sort of quiet relationship in the background with Ireland and Nigeria. We're not as famous or as popular as the UK or Canada. Our relationship, we'll say, is small, but it's really, really strong. So what I do basically is, in the institute, I recruit students, so I talk to them about coming into our school, and then I basically help them with everything else. So their Irish study visa when they're applying to join us, and everything from accommodation to settling in, and then helping them with their subject choice and everything else. Their applications to medical school, and then even afterwards when they leave us, they sort of hang around and pop in for advice sometimes, which is nice. It's always good to see them. So yeah.
Okay, I must say you have the history. You almost know everything about the history of Nigeria from your detail, from what you're saying. What has been the relationship with Yeah, what has been the relationship between the schools you represent and Nigerian students?
So do you mean in the last few years, or just recently, or?
Yeah, the ones you know just from some years back to this time.
Sure. So I suppose the relationship with the Irish medical schools and the law schools, it's very similar to the relationship with my school. And I shouldn't speak for all of the universities in Ireland because I don't work for them, but I'm sure they wouldn't mind me just giving a bit of background. So my school, for example, we were in Nigeria in the early 1990s. Our managing directors used to fly out there with their teams years before, all these universities had set up in Nigeria a long time, but before it was years before Obasanjo's first democratic government, and it was a very, very different country. There was a lot more challenges. So we were one of the only tutorial colleges going to Nigeria, and we got loads and loads of students, which was fantastic. And to be honest, we got a little bit lazy in that we thought because we had some success and our students were happy that they would just keep coming, and we learnt the hard way after about 5 or 10 years that Nigeria, more than any other country on earth, is really about relationships. And whether it's an agent you're working with or a partnering college. So as I said, we work with Bridge House and Okoye and Olashere International, Chrisland Schools. If you just ignore those relationships, they just disappear. And we really got a little bit complacent. We're as I said, we're a big school, and we've a big international presence, and we ran off to the Middle East and to Russia, and we just sort of thought Nigeria would take care of itself, and we realized that wasn't the case. And I think the Irish universities were the same. They had lots of Nigerians. As I said, in Trinity, the Royal College of Surgeons is a really famous one, particularly in the South for some reason. There'd be a lot of students from the Southeast and the South who studied in RCSI in the 1970s and the 1980s. But again, I think everybody just got a little bit complacent, and then there was a few turbulent issues in recent years, I'll say. For example, when Buhari came in, I don't know a lot about politics, and I'm just an observer, but he seemed to do a lot of good, but a lot of the good he had to do caused some issues in the early days. He had to break a few eggs, and the credit controls he put on people's foreign exchange accounts was really difficult. So we probably didn't respond to that as best as we could. We had lots of Nigerians who were saying they had the funds, they just couldn't pay the tuition fees, and that was really tricky. So we got a little bit complacent as well about 5-6 years ago. But I'm happy to say that we've been traveling regularly to Nigeria 2 or 3 times a year for the last few years. I know now that the oil price is affecting the economy and affects everybody's purchasing power, and now we're in the middle of a pandemic, so there's another challenge. But I certainly, from a professional point of view, I learned the lesson before that it doesn't matter what's going on, whether it's Ebola or a presidential election or coronavirus, you have to keep those relationships there. So that's the plan.
How do you think COVID-19 would impact on study abroad possibility?
Um, so it depends who we're talking about. So again, I'll try and be general as possible, and go through a few different groups, whether it's everything from boarding schools in Ireland or the UK, right the way up to postgrad. The challenges certainly are huge, to be honest. And but before we even talk about COVID-19, it's probably important to even lay the background for the challenges that were there beforehand. The naira was in trouble before this happened. It's been falling, obviously, and that really hurts Nigerian middle class families, who aren't going on state scholarships or anything like that. These are families who work extremely hard, and they save sometimes for 20, 25 years to pay fees abroad. There was also other issues in the international sector. So, for example, I know before the coronavirus, UK A-level schools were really struggling. I'm not sure why, but a lot of them were closing or merging, or were limiting their intakes. They were sort of turning into tutorial colleges and not taking younger students, or they were going from boarding just to day schools. So I think there was trouble afoot in the UK, certainly in the pre-undergrad area. And now that's just really COVID-19 has just really compounded the issue, which is a shame for our neighbours. Ireland, thankfully, and I hope I'm not cursing my country by saying this, but we're a little bit insulated in that we have a really strong tech sector, which is propped up by multinationals. So that for example, the global or European headquarters for pretty much every tech company on earth is in Dublin. We have Facebook, Google, Twitter, HubSpot, Airbnb, all of them. We've major banks as well, like JP Morgan, Bank of America, HSBC. They're all in Dublin. So there's a really strong multinational force there, sort of propping up our economy. So we're not going to see too many restrictions in terms of we'll say the worst scenario, which is a university closing or something like that, or our school, for example, closing its doors. Thankfully, it's just not going to happen. The other challenges, I think, is just everything else around that. So, and I suppose I might talk about the challenges from different points of view, and try to work in some solutions as well. So, first of all, from a Nigerian point of view, infrastructure has always been a problem, and now that's just something that has to be dealt with. From a government point of view, I think it's a big chance for a major rethink, to be honest, in terms of what the country actually needs, where instead of just what students think they should do, and by that I mean what's the best option for a student who wants to be employed. So if you're 16 and you want to be a doctor, well then I think you should come to my school, or you can go to an A-level college in Nigeria, or you can go on and study medicine in Ireland or the UK. But not everybody needs to go to university, and I think international education should start to cater to that. The Nigerian government should try and pivot towards, I loosely would say, a German model where there's a lot more training, there's a lot more paid apprenticeships. I know Minister Amechi, the Minister for Transport, has been sending a lot of workers and students to Chinese universities, and he's obviously set up the Railway University or the Transport University in Nigeria. And I think that's the right way to go, because you're focusing on skill acquisition as opposed to just forcing everybody to do an undergrad in engineering. You don't need 60,000 Nigerian engineers to build a railway. You need engineers, and then you need people trained in logistics, and you need construction workers, and a lot of these are hands-on skills. And the federal government can't just keep bringing in foreign workers to do all the physical tasks. So I think COVID-19 has an amazing opportunity for the government to be able to do that, really out of necessity. The next thing would be, I suppose, for maybe I'll go into students and parents, and I'll come back to maybe to my school and the challenges we faced. What do you think? Sure, I'll do that. Okay, so if I would look at one challenge maybe that schools faced, and certainly my school faced, it's standardization. So, and I'm really talking about online learning here. So when the lockdown happened in Ireland, it was way back on the 13th of March. And I'll be honest, like most schools, we weren't ready. But we're really lucky that, we have a huge support staff. We're very much a non-state school, so we have a much more innovative culture, if that's fair. So we basically moved the entire tuition of the Institute of Education online pretty much overnight. It was 1,600 hours of tuition per week that we moved over to online learning. But what we didn't do, because we didn't have time to make a decision, was we didn't standardize. So we had a mix of Teams and Zoom and Hangout, and I'm sure all the students and parents and teachers listening have the same experience, and even yourselves with business. You just did whatever you could as fast as you could, usually if it was free, and that was fine, and that got us over the hump. But it really wasn't good enough, and it's not good enough going forward. So what the Institute is doing is we've actually settled on one, and we're investing a lot of money in one. So we're going to go with the Microsoft Teams approach, which we think is best for us. But my advice in terms of a solution to the standardization issue is really to just pick one, and to stick to it. And sometimes that creates problems. And I know the universities might struggle with this because, there seems to be a lot of strikes, but there needs to be cultural buy-in. The university needs to decide which platform is best. Obviously, price and everything else has to come into it, but they have to decide which platform is best, and they have to stick to it. And, you can't change it just because a few students say they don't like it, or it doesn't suit their laptop, or this teacher won't do it. Everybody needs to row together, otherwise it'll just collapse. We had a few hiccups with the standardization problem, but thankfully all of our teachers got on board. But from September onwards, we'll be sticking to one. So that's that. The social distancing is a problem as well, which a lot of universities are going to struggle with. And I'm sorry for jumping around a bit between challenges and solutions, but I think it's the only way to do it. I think it's important for Nigerians when they're talking to their school, whether it's an A-level school or secondary school in Nigeria, in Lagos or Abeokuta, or they're thinking of going international in the UK or in Ireland. You need to ask some very blunt questions, and the first one is, what are the social distancing rules? So, for example, I know that Olashere International School has a massive complex, and they've loads of space. If the government says that you have to socially distance, they'll be able to do that. Other schools in Nigeria don't have the space. There's 30, 40 students in the class, and they just can't do that. They also can't do the Team A, Team B, or Class A, Class B thing where you come in the morning, in the afternoon, because you'll have to double the wages of teachers, and there's just going to be no budget for that. So I'm obviously not saying only go to a big school with a big campus, but it's a really important question to ask, because if there is a second wave in October or November and you're in a small university in rural, Wales or something, and they don't have time to teach you, or they don't have space to teach you, and your online option isn't good, maybe it's going to be really difficult, and your education is going to suffer. So I would ask those very blunt questions to universities. The next thing I would think about, or one of the challenges I would say, which is probably something that your audience wouldn't think about, is the community aspect of things. One of the reasons students go overseas and study is partially to have that experience. I know Nigerians are a lot more pragmatic. Their parents want to send them overseas because they want to get away from the strikes and the issues and so on, and they want something a little bit more reliable. But part of the experience of Irish or British education is that community feeling, is that, you know, the bit of fun that they're going to have, and it is really challenging, I think, for the students' mental health to be sort of stuck inside doing an online program. So again, I think that's another issue that parents are going to have to think about. That is the country that they're sending their student to. Are they comfortable that if a lockdown does happen, it's not going to be for 12 months, you know, or there'll be a blended approach, or they will be able to go in the morning and you know, maybe do classes in the morning and then online in the afternoon, or vice versa, or whatever, as long as there's some engagement. And it's really up to schools, teachers, deans, all these committees that run schools to do as much as they can for the community aspect, if there is an online component, you know. So whether that's having hangout sessions or just, you know, parties or karaoke things, all this stuff is really, really important. I'm sure you experienced this yourself. I know I went a little bit crazy after 12 weeks working remotely. You know, we're human beings. We're not designed to be locked indoors, staring at screens. So the community aspect is really, really huge. Infrastructure then, as I said, you know, obviously from a national point of view is huge, but the infrastructure in the school or in the university is absolutely key as well. So there's no point in spending 2 million naira on Microsoft Teams, but you don't have a good IT system, or your IT team, your IT help desk isn't good enough, you know. So then there's a problem. There'll be a problem 15 minutes in on the first day, and you don't have anybody to fix the problem, and you lose a whole day. It's a whole day of tuition gone. They really have to invest. I know it's nearly impossible for schools to find the money, but certainly the private schools are going to have to find the money, because there's no alternative. A lot of schools were teed up with this technology beforehand. So I know Bridge House, for example, I believe had an online solution in place before COVID-19. So you know, their students were pretty much uninterrupted. Talking about the Nigerian schools for a second, I think that that don't have the infrastructure. People really have to get creative, you know. And I know it's a bit of a cliche, but they have to think outside of the box. So if you're in a let's say a government school, and there's a second wave and there's a lockdown in October, and you're in Yaba, and you know there's parts of Nigeria or parts of Ireland that have terrible broadband connection, your school needs to make a list of what areas have good connection and what don't, you know. And the local government needs to come in and talk to the schools and find out which areas need help. Obviously, they can't afford to just fix the broadband for the whole local government area. You know, I know it's not that simple. But what they probably can afford to do is fix one particular area, you know. So if they look at maybe setting up a small hub, or pumping some money into the school, bringing in, you know, maybe 25% of the kids, and then sending another 25% of the kids to another building in the area, and just try to beef up the IT systems there. You know, a lot of churches or community centres have offered their assistance as well in terms of giving spaces. So I think the community needs to come together, and people just need to be creative, you know, because if we're not creative and we don't come together, there's just going to be no solutions, and there's going to be children sitting at home and not learning, and nobody wants that, you know. Nobody wants to take a year off or even a semester off, because it's just too much time lost. The major challenge, sorry, not the major challenge, there's probably more challenges to talk about, but the next challenge, I'd say, for universities is the exams. And this is whether you're going to be physically in the school or online. So some of the online offerings are fantastic, but the exams is where they really struggle. So again, if you're looking at a blended approach, or an online, you know, a complete distance package, say for example, you know, you could do an MBA in Harriet-Watt University in the Edinburgh Business School, you need to make sure that those schools do exams locally, or they do exams near you. You know, there's no point in doing entering a degree program in a university in Leeds, and it's all online, but the exams are in Leeds, and you need to go and do the exams in November. If there's an outbreak and Nigeria locks down and you can't get on the plane, you're just not going to get your degree, you know, and your exams are going to be kicked on to the next semester. So it's really important that, again, it's another question that students should make a note of. Ask the university, ask the tutorial college, you know, if my son or daughter gets stuck at home in Dublin, or they're learning remotely in Lagos, what are their exams going to look like? You know, what's the plan? Are they going to fly to Dubai to do exams, or, you know, will they have to go to Abuja, or can they do them online? I think that's really important. Another challenge, because there's so many challenges because it's a pandemic, is the quarantining issues, and it's really wrapped into the visa. So again, you need to check with your university, and check hopefully with the embassy. The Irish embassy, I know, in Abuja is open and working overtime. They have an amazing team there that turns around study visas for Ireland really, really fast. You need to check what the quarantine rules are. And you also need to check what the emergency quarantine rules are, you know. So if there's, and I know a lot of this is hypothetical, but I suppose we can only talk hypothetically in terms of the next year, because no one knows what's going to happen. If there is a second wave, you know, and you land in, I don't know, say you're going to do a degree program in Malta, you need to check that the Maltese aren't going to lock you up for 3 weeks in a hotel, and that your school doesn't have an online option, you know, because that might affect your GPA, that might even affect your immigration status. In Ireland, it's relatively straightforward. There's going to be a 2-week quarantine. So if you arrive in Ireland from Nigeria, there's a 2-week quarantine, which is obviously strict. You'll have to adhere to that. But after that, you're free, of course, to enter your university. So Nigerians can plan ahead. You know, my Nigerian students that are joining the Institute of Education, they know that they're just going to come a little bit early this year, and they're not going to miss orientation. They're not going to miss any assembly meetings or anything like that. So I think it's really important to get the quarantine information, and then, as I said, that the plan B. It is hard to get, because I understand. I know governments all over the world are making this up as they go along. But you should certainly try and have that information to hand.
Okay. What strategies would you suggest to cushion the effects of COVID-19 on international education?
So I would take I would extract. It's just extracting what from what I just said. It really depends on who you are, what you want to do, and where you want to do it. But I would use all the criteria I mentioned, and really ask what's best for you and what's best for your career opportunities. So the obvious one is the state of the nation. Pardon the pun. I know we're on State of the Nation, but the actual health state of the nation that you're looking at. So, for example, it's probably not a good idea to go to the United States. You know, it's obviously going to be difficult to get in there anyway with the new visa restrictions. But the United States and Russia have not got a handle on this. They both have very strong healthcare systems, and I'm sure that they're both fantastic places to study. But for this current moment, for this current intake, September 2020, it just doesn't seem smart that you would take the risk. So I would very crudely look at the numbers, look at what countries have it under control. It's a bit crazy to say, but Spain and Italy are actually coming at the other side of this. Germany has fantastic English language speaking courses for undergrad and masters and MBA in Germany, and most of their provinces have very low COVID-19 numbers now. Ireland, as I said, we've exited lockdown. Our school is opening up as normal. We'll be open a week later than normal. It'll be the first week in September. but we haven't cancelled any classes. We still have really strong enrollment, and our cases have pretty much dropped. The Irish government announced, I think 4 weeks ago, that COVID-19 was actually extinguished in the community, which means you can't actually catch, you can't catch COVID-19 from just being out and about, I suppose. And if you're smart and if you're safe, we would pray that hopefully everything will be fine. So the numbers here look really, really good. And then there's a few other European countries that are doing really, really well as well. So that'd be the first thing I'd say to mitigate. The second thing I'd say would be, when it comes to the actual program that you're doing, you should really ask yourself, do you need to be there physically? So when it comes to medicine, obviously you can't do medicine online. So if you're Nigerian and you want to study medicine, you should come to my school and we'll get you into medicine. And you have to do your surgical skills and anatomy, and you need to cut people open and all, get covered in blood and all that sort of stuff. So unfortunately for medicine, dentistry, veterinary science, some STEM colleges or courses, of course, some electrical engineering and so on and so forth, you have to be physically there because a lot of it is hands-on. But if you're looking at doing law or business, marketing, computer science, even an MBA, there's really, you should have no hesitation for doing that online directly. You're going to save money. You're going to save money on travel, on expenses, on visa, all of the above. They're usually a little bit cheaper, the online options. And if you apply the criteria that I mentioned, if obviously it's a reputable university, as I said, somewhere like the Edinburgh Business School, they do local exams. So you don't need to fly to Scotland and worry about a second wave or, God forbid, a third wave or something like that hitting Nigeria or hitting Scotland, and you can't do your exams. You can do your exams online, or you can do them, you'll have to travel to Lagos or Abuja, but you can do them in country. So I would tell students to really embrace the online products if they're there. And then what some students have, or sorry, some schools have, and this is what my school is rolling out just as an insurance policy, basically. We have an online program running in tandem with our physical normal program. So what we run is called the 1-year ILC program. It's like a preparation course for the Irish A-levels, as I said. But if something happens for our Nigerian applicants, and either they are not allowed on a plane in Nigeria, or let's say that they're not allowed to land in Dublin, which probably won't happen because we never close Dublin Airport anyway. Or say there's a lockdown in Dublin in January, or we'll say they're only applying now and they don't get their visa to September. You can start your online program in September. So you can start your classes and you can wait for whatever problem there is to resolve itself, whether you're waiting for a visa or, British Airways cancelled your ticket, and I think that's going to be a big one. A lot of people had flight cancels, and they're going to take forever to change them or get them refunded. Or as I said, the big one, if we have to send all our students to their student accommodation or to their Irish host families, their education is going to be completely uninterrupted. Their classes are going to be all online and no time will be lost. So that's another approach Nigerians could take really for undergrad and for postgrad courses as well. These are really direct questions you can ask your agent or the admissions counselor or whatever. Do you have an online offering if there's a crisis, if there's a second wave, if I can't get on the plane? And show it to me. I want to see what it is. I want you to give me my login credentials. I want to test it. And as I said, talk about the exams. And one more thing, sorry, I just wanted to say, this window, I think, I hope it's a window of positivity. The cases might be increasing in the UK and the US and Russia. But the death count seems to be going down, which is good, which would imply that we seem to be coming out of this, which is, God willing, going to happen. But if it doesn't, I think right now is really the last window for us to actually get everything in order in terms of infrastructure and hiring that extra IT person, or fixing the broadband in the school, or another thing that just came to me recently was you know, a lot of people in the Nigerian media and abroad say that, you know, Nigeria is really well connected, and you know, most Nigerians have a phone, and that's true, but most Nigerians don't have a laptop, and it's really, 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 really hard to do an undergraduate degree on your phone. You know, it's annoying enough to book a flight or send an email sometimes. So, you know, if you have the funds to do that, or to get that delivery, or to borrow one, or a friend or whatever, you should really get all those affairs in order. And then that goes for the universities and the schools in Nigeria as well. There was a phrase, again, I heard this the last few weeks. I think it was JFK said, "The time to fix your roof is when the sun is shining." So now is the time to spend the money on infrastructure. You know, to get the connectivity up, to get everyone trained up, to get all the trainers trained up. And then, as I said, if things get worse in Nigeria, or if there's a second wave in Europe, we have all the systems in place that we can deal with it.
Okay. What advice would you give to educational institutions in Nigeria and around the world in resuming full-time academic activities amidst the COVID-19 pandemic?
So is this secondary schools or universities?
The entire school in general.
Okay. Again, I think it would be I think it would be a selection of everything we've covered, you know. But the major one, and the major one is the online offering. You know, you have to get that online offering set up. We all know there's some free ones there, like Zoom, and I know half the world is on Zoom, but it's really not secure. It's not ideal for learning. There's a few restrictions as well, you know, in terms of participants and class duration times and so on. So whatever money was going to be spent on, say, school lunches for March 2020, April 2020, June 2020, that possibly wasn't spent, it really needs to go into the online offering. I think that's the only thing that they can really do. You know, a lot of schools in Nigeria, whether they're so when it comes to the private boarding schools, you know, that are sort of out a little bit in the suburbs, or maybe they're remote, like Green Springs and White Sands and schools like that, they have space maybe, and maybe they have the funds to build extra classrooms, you know, over the next few months and expand for social distancing. But the government schools don't have the space, you know, they're in built up areas, and they probably don't have the funds either. So the social distancing just isn't going to work. So the online offering has to be there. As I said, taking a detailed list of who has what is another approach you could take. That was one of the first things we did. We contacted all of our students. We have about 1,400 students, and we said, so we roughly knew where they lived, of course, because we had their addresses, but we didn't know if they lived in a part of Dublin that had really bad broadband, or maybe they didn't have a laptop. A lot of our Irish students, a lot of our international students didn't have a laptop. They had their dad's laptop or their mum's iPad. But guess what happened when the lockdown kicked in? Dad needed to use his own laptop to work, and mum needed to use her iPad to work. So all of a sudden there was no laptop. So kids were on the phone. I would say most Irish people didn't have a strong broadband package. You know, they had broadband that was enough to maybe watch Netflix on a Friday night, but they didn't have the broadband to have 3, 4, 5, 6 people having meetings on Zoom and streaming classes on Teams and that sort of thing. So what would you call it? A digital audit should be carried out as soon as possible to see who's going to be left behind. Because there are definitely students, and there's definitely students listening to this who know what I mean, that they're on their dad's laptop or they're on the family computer, but their brothers and sisters are in the house, and if there's a second wave, they're all going to be fighting for that, and they're going to have to take turns. I don't know if this idea is ridiculous, but I wonder if we could go back to sort of more simple community solutions, like say if you're on a road and you've 4 or 5 people who are in your class, maybe you should take turns all being in the same house, for the same class, so then you can use the same device. I know that'll probably drive parents crazy. I'm sure no one wants that sort of idea to take hold, because it'll drive the parents insane. But I don't see why that can't happen. If say, for example, I'm in an apartment block in Akoi, and I've got really good broadband, and I've got my own laptop, and I know 5 of my friends are in the area and they don't have a laptop. They should come to my house or my apartment, and they should do classes in my room on my laptop. It'll also keep them sane. They'll have other students to work, and I know from my experience working with Nigerian students, they tend to study and learn in pods. They tend to study together and go back and forth with questions. So, as going back to being a little bit creative, we don't all have to buy a MacBook Pro and spend 500,000 naira on a broadband package. We just need enough to get through the next hump. But I certainly think it would be crisis planning. There's no way of there's no way of combating a second wave and just going to school as normal. It's just not going to happen. The Nigerian government isn't going to allow 150 people in a lecture hall.
Okay. What are the challenges faced by international students in getting admission into foreign institutions?
I think tuition will be a big one. In terms of the delay on tuition payments being made, and obviously the naira is getting hit pretty hard as well. I suppose you only had me on for an honest opinion. I think a lot of universities are going to raise their fees. The Institute of Education is not going to raise their fees. We've decided that, and definitely we're not going to do that for at least 12 or 18 months. And there'll be some bursaries for students. I do think some UK universities are going to increase their fees, and that's going to be a challenge. The next thing is the visa situation. I know some European embassies still haven't opened up in Nigeria, so you physically can't lodge your application. You've paid your full fees, you've been accepted, you have your offer letter, you booked your flights, but you can't even apply. That's going to be a problem, but that challenge, I think, goes back to the previous questions, which is you need to pick a university in a country that's open. And I'm shamelessly flying the flag for Ireland here. The Irish Embassy in Abuja is open. All of the Irish universities and institutes of technologies are massive fans of Nigerian students. Many of them are out here. The big universities like Trinity and the Royal College of Surgeons, but also smaller ones like Griffith College, Griffith College Limerick, Griffith College Dublin, Institute of Technology Tralee, Galway Mayo Institute of Technology. They are delighted to have Nigerian students, be it undergrad or postgrad, MBA. They have lots of scholarship programs. So they will fast track your application, and it's really not too late to apply. If people saw their visa get ignored or whatever by another university or another country. So the visa is definitely a challenge, but as I said, I would pick a country that is open for business, and that's one way of getting around it.
Okay. What advice would you give the Nigerian government to help it properly position their institutions to meet international standards?
Um, in terms of the universities,
Both the universities and other
institutions. Okay.
institutions, which include.
Um, so that's it's a very big question, and it's probably a little bit beyond my pay grade, but I'll give it a go. I think the elephant in the room, which has to be addressed, is investment. And I know I've been working in Nigeria and with Nigeria, and I've Nigerian friends and former classmates, so I know how challenging the situation is for the government. And every time they get over a hump, there's just another massive wave hits them, whether it's the oil price falling or obviously the situation we're in now. I accept how difficult it was, and especially even for the APC, they came into government in 2015, and most of the sovereign accounts were just empty. They were just pilfered, so they had to start from zero. But the truth is, they're never going to improve until there's investment. And the government just needs to find the funding. And I know that's easy for me to say. I'm an Irish citizen sitting here a long way away, and you're a private citizen, and I'm sure you want the same. But the government just has to do it. There's no way that they can improve without paying teachers more, without improving all of these online offerings I told you about, the infrastructure and so on. Examinations is a huge one. The integrity of exams needs to be protected. Obviously, there was the BBC scandal that we all know about, and we don't need to go into that horrific scandal that young women were being blackmailed for grades and so on. I think that was a major blow for reputations. But investment, I think, will get a lot of those bad eggs out of there. Another elephant in the room, maybe there's more than one elephant in the room, is the issues with the unions. And the teachers' unions. And I don't know if it's a state problem or a federal problem, or a local government problem in terms of the unions, but that is something that the government needs to, I suppose, get better at. It's not going to go away. The unions have a legal right to exist. Ireland has problems with unions. Thankfully, my school doesn't. All of our teachers are privately employed, so we've never had a strike in 50 years. But other Irish schools have problems with strikes. And obviously, you know better than I do that so many universities in Nigeria have problems with strikes. The government just needs to either engage earlier, or I don't know, or be tougher, or up wages or something. But the constant strikes, and they seem to happen so fast, and it's not all the government's fault. A lot of these strikes are illegal. A lot of them don't go through the proper channels. They don't go through the proper labor relations courts. They just, I can understand. I imagine how frustrating it would be if your wages got delayed. But if there's a delay or something happens, you can't just close the university for 6 weeks. You have to go to court. So if there was a way of strengthening that, in that obviously keeping the right to strike and allowing unions to be there and have their say, but if there was a mechanism that could be brought in place that made them do it just, we'll say, less often, and more legally, more wriggle room for third parties to come in and mediate. But as I said, I think the only thing that they can do is invest, and there's no way around that. I saw, I don't know if the statistic is true. I read it a few weeks ago that the Nigerian federal budget for education is the same roughly as what Nigerians will pay sending their students to study in the UK, which I think is about 158 billion naira. I don't know if that's true. But I was just roughly doing the numbers earlier, and I think it certainly could be true. And if it is, that's just astonishing. Like, imagine if those parents were happy that the quality was good enough, and the faculties were stable enough that there wouldn't be a strike, and that if students paid their fees, that they would get their diploma. all that money would come flowing back. Obviously, some, a lot of Nigerians are going to go overseas anyway. There's fantastic medical schools, law schools. Everyone wants to go to Harvard and so on. That's not going to change. But the bulk of those students really should be looking at studying in Nigeria. And it's just a shame that so many parents in Nigeria feel that they have no choice. But hopefully in the next few years, with investment, that can change.
All right. Thank you very much. What is the process of getting?
Could you repeat that?
What is the process of getting scholarship for students who would want to get scholarship into your college?
Okay, so my tutorial college, the Institute of Education, we only have limited scholarships, so we'd be quite expensive. We would have small bursaries that would certainly soften the blow, but we don't do full scholarships. The only way, I suppose, to find out is to apply. So I can drop a link in this post later, and if anyone's interested, they can have a look, and they can come to one of our seminars or open evenings. We run open evenings throughout the summer. In terms of the universities in Ireland for the undergrad and postgrad, some of them are really substantial. You could do an undergraduate degree for about 600,000 naira a year. With discounts on accommodation as well, which is a globally recognized degree program, which is really, really competitive. Particularly if you've really strong WAEC grades, if you've lots of A's and B's across the board, the scholarships are there. You just need to apply. And one piece of advice I'd say, and I suppose, to be honest, this goes for my school as well. If someone sends an email to university and says, "Do you do scholarships?" no one really wants to engage with that student, because you're just sort of setting off on the wrong foot. It's best to apply and then say, while you're applying, just so you know, I really need a scholarship, or I would like a scholarship, or I think I deserve one, or can you tell me, is there going to be a chance to get one during the year, or maybe in year 2 or something, or could you offset my accommodation fees? And they usually do, and despite all the doom and gloom that we've been talking about, and all the pandemic chaos, Nigerians should remember that foreign universities don't just want them now, they need them, because their universities are going to get really, really hard hit. Their governments are going to be really hard hit. There's lots of students in other parts of the world that can't travel, that had paid full fees, and they're not allowed to get on a plane. They're either in lockdown, or the Irish government won't allow that certain country in, or the UK government won't give them a visa. So a lot of these universities are hurting. So I think there would be scholarships, for business and engineering and colleges like that. Medicine is a little bit more unique. It's quite unusual to get a scholarship for medicine, just because it's so hard to get into. So I'd say that straight off the bat, the Irish medical schools wouldn't really do scholarships.
Okay. And finally, will COVID-19 affect international scholarships, fellowships, and other forms of funding students receive?
Yeah, I think it will. I sort of, just to wrap that into the last section of my previous answer. Again, now a lot of schools are revising their fees, and their fees for September 2020 have been set for a long time, obviously. But I'm noticing from my colleagues who work in the other universities, there are new scholarships popping up. A lot of application windows have extended. Certainly, the Irish Embassy in Abuja isn't going to punish anyone for applying late. In the past, obviously, that wouldn't look good, but the Irish Embassy in Abuja are really understanding about how tricky it was. They were all in lockdown as well. They weren't able to work. So I think COVID-19 will affect scholarships, but in a positive way, in that there'll be more of them, because the universities really want these students to come and join their program. And whether COVID-19 was in existence or not, the Institute of Education wants Nigerians to study with us anyway. So we're delighted whether students come to us.
Okay. So before we go, how can students or interested persons get information about your college? Can you share with the viewers who might be interested in getting into your school?
Yeah, so you can find us on Instagram and Facebook. I'll post those links onto the show post, hopefully, if it's not too late. And then we have a website. Our website is a bit of a mouthful. It's www.instituteofeducation.ie/international, which is a big mouthful. But the easier way to probably contact us is really just by email to talk to our admissions team. So you can email us at international@ioe.ie. So international@ioe.ie. And whether you just want to talk about fees, or you want to talk about accommodation, or how long is the program, all that sort of stuff, we can direct you to the website, or we can set up a call. But as I said, we've some virtual seminars and open evenings coming up. We're doing one pretty much every second Friday for the next 2 months. So if anybody sends us an email or goes on our Facebook page or Instagram, they'll see links to that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Brian Shanley, for joining us on this discussion.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.